really excited to share this presentation with you guys today because it's all about the tools that are in my book, The NeuroWhereabouts Guide. And as Cody just said, it just came out in Spanish. And so I have the Spanish version and the English version links inside of the chat if you'd like to see it. And please note, this is a very thick book. It was written in infographic style with lots of fun graphics, really fun and easy to read. Now, what I'm imagine is that you guys are mostly clinicians that are here today. And so if I've got clinicians and parents, please feel free at any time to jump in and ask a question. So you can unmute and jump in and ask anytime. What I'm going to be doing with you guys today is really training on a clinical level rather than what I usually do, which is talking to parents about how they can prevent risky behavior, because that's what this book was written for. It is a neurodevelopmental guide for parents and families who want to prevent high-risk behavior in kids. But it also includes all of the tools that I've used as a clinician myself when working with parents. So there are two ways that I work with folks. One is on the prevention side and two is on the treatment side. But I got to tell you guys, I always think treatment also is prevention because you're preventing further use. Okay, so I don't know if you guys have heard any of my story, but I actually am a person in long-term recovery. These are pictures of me when I was growing up. And by the time this picture, this 16-year-old feathered hair picture of me was taken, I had already started using intravenous substances. I kept the secret from my mom for a very long time. I lived with a single parent and I just brought home all A's, and my mom went and worked her 2-3 jobs and we survived. But I had an overdose when I was 18 and went into rehab. This awesome big Texas hair picture of me was taken the day that I graduated from rehab, and my sobriety date is February 3rd, 1989. So I recently last month celebrated my 32nd year of recovery, which makes me feel really, really old, but pretty badass too. I feel very proud of being in recovery for this long. And when I started studying brain development, it was really to answer the question, like, why did I make those bad choices? I just couldn't understand why this good, smart kid made the choices that I made. So I started studying brain development, and this is my absolute favorite study that was published in 1999 by a researcher named Dr. Jay Guide and his colleague Gautier. And what you see is the picture of some healthy kids that have no diagnosis, no substance use, no mental health, as their brain grew and developed. And when I started reading everything about frontal lobe, I started learning about the use it or lose it principle, which basically says that if you don't use these cells, they actually get pruned away instead of making long, thick neuronal networks for the skills that we use. So it gave me the idea to start teaching parents how to use brain-based praise. And I also use it in session with my clients. And so I started to learn about what the frontal lobe actually does. And of course, we call those executive functioning skills. And so I created some executive functioning scripts for parents, and you can also learn them as a clinician so that you can identify which particular executive functioning skills are your client is low on, and then start using some brain-based praise to increase those skills. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go down this list of parenting tools and teach you guys how I use them with parents in sessions and also at schools. And then we have the last half is all on clinical tools that are in the book that you can also use. Okay, so we'll start off with the basic high-risk behavior checklist. So this is something that you want to make sure your parents have. And if you're a school counselor and you're doing parent presentations, if you're teaching parents how to prevent high-risk behavior, you got to let them know that there are a lot of behaviors that our kids are tempted to engage in today, primarily because of our digital age. They have just access to more of these things. And so in the book, I actually did research on all of these 18 different high-risk behaviors to find out, when do they peak? And so I really wanted to know when parents needed to have those prevention conversations with kids, because interestingly enough, bullying peaks in the 7th grade. It peaks. That means it starts coming down in the 8th grade. And so parents really need to have that conversation in the 5th, 6th grade to get kids ready for what they're about to see in school. Pornography, 70% of youth, male youth, are using pornography by the age of 13. I actually had a phone call a couple months ago from a parent who was just frantic because her new tablet that her kiddo had to use for Zoom class had no parental limits on it, and found her 9-year-old girl watching pornography on it. So that type of exposure can change the brain. So these are the things that are included in the book. And of course, no topic has more than 2 to 4 pages of information on it, so it doesn't overwhelm parents. What they can do is when their child gets to the age, because I have elementary, middle, and high school chapters, when they get to that age, they can just read that one chapter and learn which behaviors spike during that developmental period of time, and understand what's going on in the brain during that child's stage of development, to really understand what's normal and what's not normal, and what you can do using brain-based praise, and to talk about these things. Okay, so the next thing is executive functioning scripts. So for all of the executive functions, and I'll show you a list of them in just a second, I've got some scripts that parents can use. And it's just really orienting yourself to, okay, what is an executive function? Like, for instance, abstract thought is something that kids move into in a second phase of brain development between 11 and 25. Prior to that, they're very concrete thinkers. In order to help them move into abstract thought, which is the foundation for empathy. If you think about what empathy is, the ability to imagine what somebody is feeling and thinking, even if you've never gone through that, it requires abstract thought. So you really want to positively reinforce this by using brain-based praise and executive functioning scripts. And so some things that I would teach a parent how to do is say things like, what do you think someone might be thinking who feels suicidal? How might suicide affect that person's loved ones? Those are great open-ended questions that help a child talk about suicide and use their abstract thinking. So what ifs, tell me mores, could this happen? What would happen if? Those are great questions for that. And so in the book, there are scripts for all the different executive functioning skills. The next thing that is an amazing tool, if you guys are clinicians out there, then you know how important it is to have emotional literacy. So a lot of times we have to educate our clients on labeling emotions and finding out where that energy lives in their body, because they weren't taught that. I don't know about you guys, but I was not taught how to identify my emotions. I was actually told not to feel emotions and to buck up and just get through it. And so it's important to remember that emotional literacy is a very basic skill that not only can we teach parents how to teach in their kids, but of course our clients. So my favorite one is the feeling wheel. I created this for the book, a Feel What You Feel wall, that has all the different types of major emotions, the 7 different major emotions, and all the secondary and tertiary emotions that are based upon the primary emotion. This is a great way to teach teenagers, and using a feeling wheel for adults Here is my favorite way for teaching younger kids. So early childhood and elementary school kids, if you will encourage your parents, or if you as a clinician will buy a bag of Kamochis. So the word Kamochi stands for the word feeling in Japanese. And so these things, they're so cute. I have a bowl of Kamochis in my office. I have one client who is 9 years old, and he comes in and he takes the bowl and he dumps it on my sofa, and he just like goes through all of them until he finds a few that really represent what he went through that week. It is a fun way to teach kids how to identify emotions. And there actually are some free resources on the Kamochis.com website. Really great company and a really fun tool. I also recommend, as families, getting a bowl of these and putting them on the dinner table. And so you're passing around the broccoli, and you're passing around the potatoes, and you pass around the Kamochis, and everyone takes one. And it's really fun if you do this early and get kids active in identifying feelings. Then they will be more emotionally literate as teenagers and young adults. Okay, another thing that I teach families is what the dysfunctional family rule is, especially if I see it. So I've got a family that I'm working with right now who has not told their kiddo something that's going on in the family. And so I asked them, do you have a rule of don't talk, don't trust, don't feel, and don't deal? Is that what you guys usually do in your family? And parents will tell, of course, us so many different reasons why they don't want to tell kids certain things. And I know that developmentally appropriate times are key for discussing certain information. That's why in the book, I made sure to write about developmentally appropriate ways to talk to kids. But a lot of times what I see families do, especially in an unhealthy family system, is they brush things under the rug and they just move on, which teaches kids the dysfunctional family rule. Don't talk, don't trust, don't deal, don't feel. So of course, the functional family rule in our family is we talk. We trust each other. We feel our feelings and we deal with what's going on. And so teaching them and families this can sometimes really be freeing, especially if you have parents who grow up in an unhealthy family system. Making sure they know the difference between the dysfunctional and the functional family rule is critical. Okay, so when your kiddos are growing and you want to shape their behavior, you do behavior modification. And so I know you as clinicians, you probably had operant behavioral principles class. I don't know if you guys ever had Rat Lab, but I took Rat Lab in my undergrad and in my graduate school. But Rat Lab is how we learned how to shape behavior. I have a whole presentation that I do on how to shape kids' behavior. And of course, there are some really good programs out there that are like, for instance, if you work in school systems, PBIS, positive behavior, is a really beautiful way of doing behavior modification. Now, this is a tool that I use in my therapy a lot. And so I have a blank page that you can find in the book. And I also have a sample contract, which is cut out right here for you in this slide. And so, oh, I feel, excuse me, sneeze coming on. So it's important to remember to teach your families when they're shaping behavior, a few things. Keep it simple, keep it positive, and keep it consistent. So a lot of times when kids are growing up, we verbally contract with them. Like, if you do this, you will earn that, or if you don't, you earn this consequence. What I recommend is that you continue doing verbal behavior modification until there's a problem. If a child is very resistant, that's when I think you should get out the paper and do a contract. The earlier you introduce this to kids, the more normal it will seem when they grow older. I find that a lot of adolescents have a lot of resistance to a behavior contract, but it is pretty critical to use this. As a clinician, though, it is critical that you let parents know, just because you're introducing a contract doesn't mean the behavior is going to change. It actually will guarantee that the behavior will get worse before it gets better because of an extinction burst. And here's the definition of it. This is actually found in chapter 6 of the book. An extinction burst is really a temporary increase in the behavior that you want to see decrease, because, and it's a very expected normal reaction, right? When you tell a kid, oh, nope, you will not earn your car, you will not earn your door, you will not earn your cell phone unless you give us a negative drug test, you might have kids who actually start using more because they don't believe their parents due to inconsistency or a highly resistant kiddo. So this is something that I write out with them in session. Usually I meet with the parents first. If I can meet with a teenager and say, look, dude, your parents are about to put paper in your life. How about if you and I meet first and create the contract, and then we introduce it to your parents to try to give them some agency and ownership of it, rather than it being something that is being forced onto them. So this is very helpful to teach parents about how to start trying to shape behavior, especially of an oppositional, defiant middle school or teenager, and also making sure they understand what extinction bursts are, that the process will be slow, but over time, if they are consistent and they put rewards first and consequences second, then what you'll see is you are working toward positive reinforcement rather than negative reinforcement or punishment. So I'd love to talk more about that, but I've got so many different tools to share with you guys today. Here is the next one, which is kind of the pièce de résistance of the book. I did a lot of research that really uncovered the idea that kids want to know from their parents how to act out in the world, especially when they start turning into middle school and high school, although it seems that they don't want to know. They want autonomy and they want agency. But all of the research that I read said that kids still really want to know. And when parents become permissive and lax on the rules, it makes them feel unsafe, and they actually act out even more, even though the limbic system that's fully formed by age 11 wants to do whatever it wants to do, whenever it wants to do it. So this is a really great way of maintaining consistency of behavioral expectations from early on without lecturing. A family code is a very simple way of unifying the family with just a few simple values and rules. And here's an example that you guys are welcome to borrow. This is also in the book. In our family code, we treat others with kindness, compassion, and respect on and offline. We take care of our brain development. We don't engage in risky behaviors. We never use drugs, and we only use alcohol when we're 21 or over. So here is the family code building activity. What I want you to do is, if you work in a school, have a family code building parent activity. These are really fun to do if you're in elementary school or middle school, but invite people who have high schoolers too, because you can introduce this at any time. I actually had a parent who sat down with their college age student right before she went off to college and said, let's build a code. Like, I want you to know what our values are. And the adolescent was like, oh my God, but really got into the activity once they sat down. So for little ones, it's fun to get a poster board, a marker. I actually had a father create a family crest digitally on his Adobe suite and use that in their family code. But you want to have a family meeting, and you can either do this in therapy, which is really fun, or have a school event or activity where you build a family code. And basically what you do is you first sit down and say, everybody's contribution is important, even the little ones, even the pre-verbal. If they want to draw something on the family code, great. Then you brainstorm about family values that represent your family. And I've got a list of them in the book, but you can also just Google values. Then what you want to do is make a list of risky behavior that goes against your family values. And this is a great way to start talking to your kids and introducing them to risky things. Kids will say things like, what is a risky behavior? And you can say things like, oh, technology overuse or alcohol use. And then kids will ask questions like, well, wait a second, I see you drinking alcohol. It gives you a great segue into talking about that alcohol can be used responsibly at the age of 21 or over. So then you just combine your values and your risky behavior into a few sentences, add some graphic artwork, I had a family create a really pretty tree and all the leaves on it had the names of the family members and the values. It was really, really pretty. Then you put it up somewhere in your home and you refer to it every month, every other month or so. This helps you not lecture. What you're doing is you're basically saying, oh my God, did you hear about that happened today in school? A kid got kicked out for vaping. Well, that wouldn't happen in our family because we have our family code that says no drugs ever. What do you think about that, kiddo? That's how you enter that into a conversation. Rather than lecturing, you create family unity by saying, we wouldn't do that in our family. We wouldn't do that in our school. We wouldn't do that because this is our value and this is what we stand for. When kids hear that repetitively, and I mean like 6-8 times a year, this is what we do in our family. Research shows they go out into the world and they actually make decisions based upon that family code. And it also makes kids feel more safe because they have greater unity just by adding this in to your daily activities, and not daily, really weekly, monthly activities. Now, here's another way to use this. There's been a lot of research on family dinners. What they show is that as family dinners go down, high-risk behavior goes up. But the converse is also true. As a social worker, as a therapist, if you teach your families, okay, you guys need to have family dinner again, you're too disconnected, and you start to introduce family dinners, as those family dinners go up, high-risk behavior incrementally goes down. I'll show you the study that CASA did, a really cool longitudinal study where they asked family members, how much do you know about your kids? And so the families who had 0 to 2 family dinners are here in orange, and only 60% of them, compared to 92% of the families who ate together 5 to 7 dinners per week, said that they know a great deal to fair amount. This is interesting too. When asked, do you know the Likert scale had little to no information, 40% of parents said little to no information. So we look at the converse of these numbers, 8% of the families who had a lot of family meals knew little to no information. And what the research shows is that when families eat together, and it doesn't have to be just dinner, it can be breakfast on the go. It can be in the car on the way to soccer practice. But if you make a point, oh, we got to do our family meal, even if it's a 10-minute drive-through at Chick-fil-A or wherever you guys want to go, what the research shows is that kids talk more, they share more, the more bread that is broken together as a family. Kids will say things like, man, I don't want to go to the dinner table high with my eyes, bloodshot red and things like that. So I think it's really important. This is an important tool that we forget about because it seems so simple. When you're doing your assessments with your clients, ask them, how many meals do you guys eat together a week? How many used to and how many now? You will see a pattern. So at the family dinner table and the meal table, this is where you use the family code. You're going around and, you get your broccoli, your potatoes, and you get your Kamochi, and then you ask, hey, what was going on at school today? Did you hear about this? Anything happen? And then you can pop in, oh, well, the family code. While kids are going out to sleepovers, you can say, oh, wait, okay, you're on your way to somebody's house. I want you to uphold the family code, be a good representative of our family code. What's the family code? And when you hear your kiddos say, oh my God, Mom, the family code is blah, 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 please know that you did an awesome job. when they're so sick of repeating it, please applaud yourself. Even if they gripe about it, please know that's what you want. You want it to be committed into memory. Okay, here's another tool in the book. This is called the Conversation Starters Calendar. This is another great way to segue to talk about high-risk behavior. So many people say to me, oh my God, how do I bring this up? Like, I know I need to talk to my kids about suicide, but geez, this is such a hard topic. So a great way to do that is to use the calendar. So you can notice that you can go to the calendar of the month. Let's say it's March. Oh, it's Self-Injury Awareness Day on the 1st. So you sit down at family dinner and you say, hey, did you guys know it was Self-Injury Awareness Day? And kids will be like, what? What is that? And of course, you want to do it at a developmentally appropriate time. And so kids start to have increases in self-injury in middle school. So middle school age, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, depending upon the maturity level of your kiddos, is an appropriate time to start talking about this. And basically you can just say, oh yeah, I read about this online. Do you know anyone who's done that? What would you do if somebody did that? Well, yeah, that kind of goes against our family code because we protect our brain development. That's it. 5-10 minute conversation, and then you move on to something else. The Conversation Starter Calendar gives you an excuse to bring up a high-risk topic really easily. Okay, here are some other parenting tools in the book. I've got an alcohol poisoning card that parents can just cut out and pop into their teenagers' wallets. Remember, you want to uphold the family code, but you also want to tell your kiddos, if for some reason you choose not to uphold our family code, yes, you will earn a consequence, but I also want you to know that if you call me and say, you know what, I made a mistake, your consequence will be about here. But if I hear from someone else that you have gone against the family code, your consequence will drop double or triple. So be honest and be respectful, follow the code, but if you make a bad choice or make a mistake, we will work with you on that. And then you want to make sure that you teach kids, and all of the statistics are in the book, about how underage drinking spikes, especially binge drinking. You want to let kids know that that is not normal, healthy drinking, and that they need to act if they see someone overdosing from alcohol. Another thing too that you can use is the activity pyramid. Actually, the University of Missouri, Columbia gave me permission to put this in my book, which I just love because you could print this out, put it on the fridge, and when kids say, oh my God, I'm so bored, you just simply say, pick something out for the activity calendar. Follow the balance rule for technology. We use it so much today, and the pandemic has caused us to overuse our technology, and a lot of negative things can occur. You do have to make sure you monitor. I've got really good monitoring references in the book as well for monitoring software, but you also want to balance. And so if your kid is on video games for 2 hours, you say, okay, the balance rule says you got to get off and go do something else with your brain for 2 hours. I don't know what you do. I don't care what you do. Go pick it off the activity pyramid. So that's something you can teach parents how to do when they ask you, oh my gosh, what do I do about this technology stuff? Also, when you want to sit down and have a little bit more formal talk or pop bits of these into your family dinner conversations, there is a talk for all 18 high-risk behaviors. These are a couple of my favorite because I put some games in it. The gambling talk has a game that's called Play the Odds Game, and you can do this at family dinner. You could just read through some of the questions and talk to your kids about it, and then ask them, what do you think the odds of this are? What do you think the odds of that are? And you can look it up on Google. The parenting talk or talks is done by age. So how do you talk to an elementary school kid age 6 to 9 about porn? Oh my God, we have to talk about that. First exposure these days is age 8 and 9. So we've got to discuss it, but here is a list, a checklist that will really help you stay on track developmentally appropriately. Then also, I've got a couple other favorites in here, the media talk, which really helps you teach kids how to critically analyze the media, and how to check different types of sources for validity to make sure that what they're hearing is not fake news, but in the context of high risk behavior, including is the medicine talk. So many of our states out there are legalizing marijuana and calling it a medicine. Ugh. So this is a really great talk that helps you take a stand on that. What is a medicine and what is it not? And then, okay, when kids are like, oh my God, everybody's taking CBD, I'm just going to smoke pot because it will help me calm down. I'm sorry, Johnny's dad does it. What you can say to them is, in our family code, we don't do those things because marijuana arrests brain development worse than any other substance out there for longer. Not to mention, who goes to a smoke shop to get prescriptions? That's not what we do in our family. Okay. And when kids are old enough to have a smartphone or to drive, I've got a really comprehensive contract that parents can use in each one of those to go over and put it up someplace. I looked at probably 25 to 30 different contracts, and I really wanted to make it brain-based and put in every comprehensive thing that I could. So those tools are in there as well. Then the reason that the book was named NeuroWhereabouts is because of the whereabouts log. I really wanted parents to not only know where their children were in the world, their whereabouts, but also where their brain development was, their NeuroWhereabouts. And so in the back of the book in chapter 6, I've got the log. When kids start going on sleepovers, if you're a therapist who works with families, you may get this question a lot, like, how do I ensure my child's safety at somebody else's house? This is a great way to do it. You can pull out your log and take down that peer's, the parent's name and address. Make sure you don't work hard to do that. If your child wants to do a sleepover, you can give them the log and say, hey, I need you to go get this information, and then call the parent. And here is a little guide to have a peer-parent discussion, some of the topics that you can ask about, and a script to talk about how you should introduce that, and some questions. Now, of course, I don't think that I would encourage you to ask all of these on the very first play date, but this gives you some empowerment of what to ask as you get to know your kids' peers' parents. Okay, now the second half, we will go into the clinical tools. All the clinical, and there's so many more in here, but I just pulled out the things that I use so much in my own clinical practice. I do a lot of substance use assessments. I see a lot of kids. I get referred from schools who say, okay, this kid got caught drinking at a basketball game, or this kid's acting out this way or self-injuring. What do we do? How do we handle that? And I use these tools to teach the kids and the parents about what's happening in the brain. The first one is hypofrontality. This is an amazing study that was done on somebody who was using cocaine, but this actual picture is what the brain looks like when somebody's depressed, when somebody's under stress chronically, and somebody's chronically anxious. This is an fMRI looking from the top down. The colors indicate blood flow and electrical activity. What we want to see in a healthy brain that has no substance use and no mental health stress is a brain that is on and working together, very connected. Then this is a picture actually of somebody who is 10 days in detox. This is also what the brain looks like when somebody is on a drug or a substance. The limbic system lights up and the frontal lobe shuts down. That today is called hypofrontality. In my day, it was called arrested development. And then this is a picture of that same person at 100 days in recovery. So what you see is the frontal lobe is starting to turn back on, but it takes time. It takes about 18 months for this person's brain to return to this level of functioning. So here are the two ways that I use this. I have this picture laminated in my office. And what I do is I show parents, this is your scientific justification to say no to your kids using alcohol and drugs. and to get them help and treatment if they have mental health issues. A lot of times I get parents resistant to helping kids get on an antidepressant or a healthy anti-anxiety medication or getting treatment for that just because they don't believe in it. You guys know where I'm coming from. This really helps you show that if your kid's frontal lobe is off, it doesn't get to grow. And that can arrest the development of their executive functioning skills, which is the next thing I have laminated in my office. So I teach the parents and kids how the two levels of executive functioning skills are growing during the two phases of brain development. And that information is in chapter 1 of the book of Healthy Brain Development. And so the list here shows you on the left of elementary and middle school students, the executive functioning skills that grow from birth all the way up through elementary, middle. Of course, they continue to grow as we age, but then our higher level executive functioning skills really start to show up around middle school, high school, into college. And then, of course, all of these skills peak at about 25 to 27 years old, unless the frontal lobe is off. If a kiddo is using substances, or if somebody has chronic mental illness that's not being treated, or they feel unsafe, they have a lot of ACEs that they're dealing with, all of these skills can potentially arrest. Now, if you guys work in a treatment center, this is what you also want to assess when you're doing your psychosocial assessments. You want to think, did this person's brain ever get a chance to learn empathy, demonstrate emotion regulation, control their impulses? Are they very concrete thinkers, or are they abstract conceptual thinkers? Do they have difficulty shifting and flexible thinking, organizing, monitoring themselves, coordinating their thoughts and activities? If not, you can start using brain-based praise and put these into your treatment plans. Basic brain skills. Remember, the use it or lose it principle is on your side. Okay, now for those of you guys who do substance use assessments, the levels of use, which is actually in chapter 6, the high school chapter, I think it's actually in chapter 2, the high-risk behavior effects on the brain, and chapter 6. This is the one from chapter 6 because it is comprehensive. Here's what I do. When I assess a kiddo or an adult for substance use issues, I, afterward, draw the stair step on my board. And I draw in what's underneath the steps first. I teach people the different levels of use. Experimentation, trying something 1, 2, or 3 times. Misuse, sporadic. You may or may not have negative consequences. Abuse is when it becomes consistent and you start to accrue consequences from it. And then dependence, and all the 11 symptoms of dependence I will write on the board. Then I ask my teenager or my adult to tell me what level they're on. I just did this with an adult who has technology addiction. And it's interesting because when you use the levels of use as a teaching and diagnostic tool, you'll also get to find out what stage of change somebody's in. So the gentleman that I just assessed for tech addiction put an X right here on the top stair. He admitted that he had almost all of these symptoms from his tech abuse. But I've had kids who were in the abuse category who put themselves in the experimentation category, or who were definitely 1 foot into dependence and thought, I'm just misusing. That gives you more information. Then once you have that information, you can strategically put on top what the different treatments are for these different levels, and then start negotiating. So a lot of times with teenagers, I'll put, rehab, residential treatment, alternative peer groups, a lot of these things on dependence. And they're like, oh my God, no. And I'll say, okay, well, wait a second. This is your first time coming to treatment. How about if we start you off with drug testing and family counseling and individual counseling? And if you use again, then we bump you up to the next level of care. This is a great way to use least restrictive environment rule, because we want, we don't, on the first assessment, want to put a kid in residential unless they're really ready. Iatrogenic effects can be learned there, the negative effects of being in treatment with other kids, because you learn more negative things. So we want to make sure we assess correctly. And then I have the parents come into the session and I ask the child, will you teach your parents what you just learned? I've had kids stand up and go through it just the way I did. Some kids are a little resistant and I help them out, but this is a great way to allow parents to see where their child thinks they are, which gives us a little bit more latitude in open communication about that. Even though you do have to keep information confidential, I've had a kid say, you can teach them this and I'll teach them that, but I want you to erase the X on the board. So they weren't really willing to tell their parents where they were. That's okay too. You want to keep their confidence. And then when the parents come in, I ask them, where do you think your kiddo is? And then you can see they get into an argument right in front of you, which really is telling about what level they're in. But this can also serve as an educational forum to teach parents, what are my options? What are all the things that I can do for my kiddo or for myself as an adult if I have an addiction issue? Okay, speaking of, in the book, I have 2 pages dedicated to the youth recovery continuum of care. So here's page 1, and here is a list of all the different things that you can choose to put together as a treatment plan for your kiddos, depending upon the level of use, or your adults. Here's page 2, which shows you the recovery high schools, sober living options, and even collegiate recovery programs. And so I won't go through all of these. I'll let you guys use the handout so you can see them. But before you finish your assessment, you really want to determine the stage of change, not only that your patient or your client is in, but what stage their family members are in. So sometimes I'll have a kid who's in the action stage and they're ready to go to treatment, but the parent is in pre-contemplation and resists. That's a tough situation to be in because that kid's ready to go. So you have to work with that parent. You most likely will have the opposite, where parents are ready and kids are not. But what I do is I have this page that you can give to parents and loved ones to teach them about stage of change. And in this little block down here, it shows you the techniques that you should use as a parent or a clinician when you're talking to somebody who's in one of these stages. This is very important because I've got a mom who just over functions and really works her son over on grades. I have negotiated with her to stop over functioning, stop even talking about grades at all, because her son is not in the action stage. But I've taught her how to validate his feelings, even though he's not ready for a change, and encourage self-exploration on her part, and also how to talk to him about it so that it doesn't generate a fight. Lots of ways you can use stage of change. Okay, we are nearing the end, so get your questions ready. I recommend drug testing. I have read as much literature as I can find on this topic, and a lot of people don't like it, but the literature says it works. And it works because it gives kids the #1 refusal skill. So if you start drug testing early, if you teach your family, look, start early. On their 11th, 12th birthday, you give them their birthday presents and a cup that says, congratulations, you're going through phase 2 of brain development. Your frontal lobe is now growing. And I, of course, trust the part of your brain that has grown, but I don't quite trust the one that hasn't yet. And so until you have full impulse control, I'm going to give you your #1 refusal skill, kiddo. Every, I don't know, once or twice a year throughout your high school career, I'll give you a random drug test. And that way you can go to the party and say, dude, my mom drug tests me. They'll give you lots of empathy. Man, I'm sorry, dude. And then, of course, if you suspect that they're using through the sniff test or the eye test, then you can always give a drug test. And I have in my book some where to go to buy them and what to look for, and to make sure you go to a reputable place, because a lot of times Amazon will sell expired tests, but you should buy them in bulk. A box of 25 drug tests, 5 panels, a box of alcohol strips, and if your kid has vaped, a box of nicotine strips. Then it's important to teach young people, especially if they have already drank, that it is critical they know the normal drinking formula, and also to work with adults who are not ready to stop drinking yet. You can negotiate with them and say, hey, let me pull out the normal drinking formula and show you what your BAC level is. I actually have this in more detail in chapter 6, but it's this formula that is critical. Normal drinking formula means that you have no genetic risk for alcoholism, that you're in a safe environment, that you're 21 and older, you have no more than 1 serving per hour and no more than 2 to 4 servings per day, depending upon your body weight and height, and no more than 1 to 2 drinking engagements or servings per week. That is the normal, healthy drinking formula. Now, please know, you don't teach this to high school kids to condone it. You do teach this to high school kids so they know what binge drinking is versus normal drinking, because you want them to not drink under the age of 21, but we also know a large percentage of kids do. So you want to let them know that it's not okay, but if they choose to, they should not binge. And if they see somebody binging, then they need to use their alcohol card to make sure they don't overdose. Okay, I think I've got 2 more. I've got a fun page in there that teaches thinking strategies. This is something I use a lot as a therapist for clients who have difficulty moving out of concrete thought, especially if clients say, oh my God, my mom did the best she could. I can't say anything negative about her. Well, you and I know as a clinician that we have to be able to talk about the negative things our mom did and how they affected us, but you can do so in the form of a dialectic. A dialectic is something that is true and false all in the same moment. So you can love your mom and hate your mom all in the same moment. If you teach kids how to think abstractly and dialectically, then they actually make healthier decisions. And when you teach adults how to think dialectically, it actually allows them to move more flexibly in their own thinking and emotion regulation. So this gives you some scripts and definitions of what those look like. And then, of course, I have named all of the ants. We've got 3 worry ants, 2 perfectionist ants, 3 critic ants, and 1 victim Van's ant. This is just a fun way to teach adults and kids about automatic negative thoughts, our ants, and how to feel them and reframe them. And then my last announcement before I open it up is that I have been working with a beautiful charity called the John Fontaine Jr. Charity, and we are bringing everything that's in this book into an online learning platform called LeuroWhereAbouts, with lots of videos that are less than 5 minutes, 10 minutes long, lots of fun resources to make it really, really easy for parents and students and faculty of schools to get the information that they want and need. And please know, the book just came out in Spanish. Of course, I do not speak Spanish, so I've been learning how to pronounce the name of my book in Spanish over and over and again so that I won't sound totally terrible at it. But I really wanted to make sure that this book was published in Spanish, because so many of our schools in Houston are predominantly Spanish-speaking parents and kiddos, and so it is available.